Hello, my friend. Welcome. I am so glad you are here tonight. Whatever this day brought you, whether it was long or difficult or simply exhausting, it is finished now. This moment, this quiet and still moment, belongs entirely to you. So settle in, make yourself comfortable, pull your blanket a little closer if you need to, and let everything else, every worry, every thought, every unfinished thing, simply wait. Before our story begins tonight, I want to give your body a chance to catch up with the stillness your mind is already reaching for. So if you haven't already, find the most comfortable position you can. Let your head rest heavily on whatever is beneath it. Let your arms fall naturally by your sides. And take one slow breath in through your nose as slowly as you can. And breathe out through your mouth like a long, quiet sigh. Good. Once more. Breathe in slowly and out. With each breath, feel yourself becoming a little heavier, a little more still, a little more at rest. Your body already knows exactly what to do. It has been waiting for this permission all day long, and now you have given it. I am going to count down now from 10 to 1. And with every number, allow yourself to drift just a little deeper, a little further away from the day, and a little closer to sleep. 10. You are safe here. Nothing can reach you tonight. No worry, no task, no unfinished thought is important enough to keep you from this rest. 9. Feel the weight of your body. How heavy your legs have become, how soft your shoulders feel. 8. Let your face relax completely, your forehead smooth and still, your jaw unclenched and soft, your eyes gently, peacefully closed. 7. 6. You have nowhere to be tonight, nothing to solve, nothing to fix, not right now. 5. Halfway there, my friend. You are doing so beautifully. 4, 3. Your breathing is slower now, and that is exactly right. 2, and 1. There you are. Now close your eyes gently and allow me to take you somewhere very quiet, very warm, and very, very peaceful. It is 3 o'clock in the morning. The kind of 3 o'clock that most people never see, when the whole world is tucked away and the streets are completely empty, and even the night birds have gone quiet. The rain is falling softly and steadily on the cobblestones of a very small, very old village. The kind of village where every house knows every other house, where the same families have lived on the same streets for generations, where nothing very exciting ever happens, and everyone is quite happy about that. In one of the small houses near the centre of the village, in a room above a bakery, an old man named Arthur opens his eyes. He does not need an alarm clock. He has not needed one for 40 years. His body simply knows. At 3 o'clock exactly, it is time to begin. Arthur lies still for a moment, listening to the rain on the rooftop above him. He likes this moment, these first few quiet seconds of waking, when everything is still dark and warm, and the day has not yet truly started. He breathes in slowly and breathes out slowly, and then, with the quiet, unhurried movements of a man who has done this 10,000 times. He sits up. He reaches for the small glass of water on his bedside table and takes a slow, careful sip. Then he sets it back down, exactly where it was. He puts on his thick wool socks, the dark grey ones with the small hole near the left heel that he keeps meaning to mend and somehow never does. He pulls on his worn brown trousers and his heavy cream-coloured sweater, the one that his wife knitted for him many winters ago, and he runs his hand briefly over the sleeve, the way he always does every single morning before heading quietly downstairs. The wooden stairs creak softly under his feet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 steps down, and he is in the small kitchen at the back of the bakery. He does not turn on the bright overhead light. Instead, he turns on only the small lamp above the counter, the one with the warm amber shade that casts everything in a gentle golden glow. He fills the kettle and sets it on the stove, and then he stands at the window for a moment, watching the rain fall on the dark garden outside. The garden is just a small patch of earth behind the building. A few old pots, a stone bench, a rosemary bush that has survived every winter for the past 12 years. The rain taps gently on the stone bench and gathers in small silver pools on the flagstones. Arthur watches it for a moment, as he does every morning, and feels the same quiet feeling he always feels at this hour, a feeling of deep and simple contentment, of being exactly where he is supposed to be. The kettle begins to hiss softly. He turns away from the window and lifts it carefully, pouring the hot water slowly into his old blue mug, the one with the small chip on the handle that he has had since before he can remember. He adds no sugar, just a little milk from the small jug in the refrigerator, which he pours in a thin, slow stream and watches as it blooms through the dark tea in soft, pale clouds. He wraps both hands around the warm mug and breathes in the steam and takes his first slow sip of the morning. Then Arthur sets his mug down on the counter and opens the door that leads from the kitchen into the bakery itself. The bakery is dark and cool and smells, even now, even before anything has been baked, of something warm and floral and deeply familiar. It is a smell that Arthur has lived inside for his entire life. His father baked in this room, and his grandfather before that. The walls have absorbed 40 years of bread and warmth, and in the cool early morning hours, that warmth lingers like a quiet memory. He puts on his apron, the long white one that he ties behind his back with a practiced double knot, and he rolls up his sleeves to just below his elbows. Then he turns to the great stone oven that takes up most of the back wall of the bakery, and he begins the slow, careful process of bringing it to temperature. He opens the iron door and checks the embers from yesterday, which are still faintly warm, and he feeds them carefully with small, dry pieces of wood, one at a time, until the first small flame begins to grow. He watches it for a moment, adding another piece of wood, and then another, until the fire is steady and even, and the warmth begins to spread slowly through the oven and into the cool air of the room. While the oven warms, Arthur moves to the long wooden table in the center of the bakery. This is his table, worn smooth from decades of use, the surface pale and soft from years of flour. He has stood at this table nearly every morning of his adult life, and the table holds the memory of all those mornings in its wood, in the faint, pale whiteness of it, in the way the surface is just slightly hollowed in the center from the pressure of so many hands kneading so much dough. He lifts the large ceramic jar from the shelf above the table, the one where he keeps his sourdough starter, the living mixture of flour and water and wild yeast that he has been tending and feeding for 31 years. He lifts the lid and bends slightly to smell it, the way he always does, and nods slightly to himself. It smells right. Slightly tangy, slightly yeasty, deeply alive. He sets it on the table and reaches for his large mixing bowl, the deep white one, and sets it beside the starter. He measures the flour. Arthur does not use scales anymore. His hands know the weight of flour the way other men know the weight of a favorite book or a familiar tool. He scoops the flour in long, slow, sweeping motions, watching it fall into the bowl in soft white cascades, a fine pale dust rising gently in the amber light and settling again on the surface of the table. He measures the water, warm, not hot, and pours it in a slow, careful stream into the flour, watching the two come together. He adds the starter from the ceramic jar, spooning it in with a large flat spoon, folding it gently into the mixture. He adds a careful measure of salt, running it through his fingers slowly, feeling the fine grains against his skin. And then he begins to mix, slowly at first, folding the wet ingredients into the dry with large, slow movements of his hand, turning the bowl with his other hand, working patiently and without hurry. The mixture comes together gradually, rough and shaggy at first, then slowly more cohesive, more smooth, more like dough. The sound of it is soft and rhythmic, the sound of wet flour being worked, a quiet pulling and folding sound, low and constant, like the sound of someone turning pages in a quiet room. When the dough has come together sufficiently, Arthur tips it out onto the floured surface of the table and begins to knead. This is the part of the morning that Arthur loves most. The long, unhurried, meditative work of kneading bread dough. He pushes the heel of his palm into the dough, stretching it away from him, then folds it back toward himself, turns it slightly, and pushes again. Push and fold, push and fold, push and fold. The same motion repeated over and over, his weight rocking gently forward and back, the dough beneath his hands becoming gradually more smooth, more silky, more elastic. The rain falls steadily on the windows. The fire in the oven crackles softly. The lamp above the counter casts its warm amber glow across the pale, flour-dusted table, across Arthur's large, steady hands, across the slow, beautiful motion of the kneading. He kneads for 20 minutes. He has timed it by the clock on the wall many thousands of times, and now he no longer needs to. His hands tell him when the dough is ready, when it has become smooth and elastic and springs back gently under his fingers. He shapes it into a round and places it back in the large white bowl and drapes a clean damp cloth over the top and sets it near the warming oven to rest and rise. Then he wipes his hands on his apron, picks up his mug of tea, and goes back to stand at the kitchen window. The rain has eased slightly. It is still falling, but more gently now. A fine, soft rain that blurs the edges of the dark garden and makes the rosemary bush look like a grey-green cloud. Arthur stands and sips his tea and looks out at the rain and thinks about nothing in particular. This is something he is very good at, thinking about nothing in particular. He thinks his father was good at it too. He remembers standing in this same spot as a young man, watching his father stand at the window in exactly this same way, holding tea in exactly the same manner, gazing out at rain or darkness or the early grey light of morning. And there was something about the way his father stood in those moments that made the young Arthur understand, without being told, that this quiet and unhurried presence was itself a kind of work. A kind of necessary, important, unhurried work. He finishes his tea, rinses the mug, and sets it upside down on the draining board. Then he goes back into the bakery to check on the dough. He lifts the corner of the damp cloth and looks at it. It has begun to rise already, swelling gently at the center, the surface smooth and slightly domed. He covers it back up and turns to prepare the bread tins. He takes 4 long loaf tins from the shelf, each one dark and seasoned from years of use, and he coats the inside of each one with a thin layer of butter, running a small folded piece of paper around the corners and sides, making sure every surface is covered. He sets the tins in a row on the counter near the oven, where the warmth can reach them. While the dough rests, Arthur begins to prepare the pastry dough for the morning's sweet rolls. He takes more flour, more butter, cold butter, cut into small cubes, and begins to work the butter into the flour with the tips of his fingers, rubbing the fat and flour together in light, quick movements until the mixture resembles rough breadcrumbs. He adds a little cold water, working it in quickly, and then wraps the pastry in a cloth and sets it in the cold room to rest. His fingers are cold from the butter, and he warms them briefly near the oven door, pressing his palms flat toward the warmth, feeling the heat seep into his knuckles. The dough in the bowl has risen beautifully. Arthur goes to check it, lifts the cloth, sees the smooth, swollen surface of the dough, presses one flour-dusted finger gently into it, and watches the indentation spring slowly back. He nods. It is ready. He tips the dough out onto the floured table again, and divides it carefully into 4 equal portions with his bench scraper. A single firm stroke through the center, then 2 more strokes to make 4 pieces. He shapes each piece into a smooth oval, pulling the surface of the dough tight and sealing the seam underneath, and places each shaped loaf into one of the prepared tins. He covers them again with the damp cloth and sets them back near the warm oven for their final rise. Now there is nothing to do but wait. This too is part of the work. This patient waiting while the dough does what dough must do. Arthur does not mind it. He has learned over many years that waiting is not the absence of work. Waiting, done properly, is its own kind of skill. He takes the small wooden stool from the corner and sets it near the oven, and he sits on it with his elbows on his knees, watching the fire through the iron grate of the oven door. The fire is steady and orange and gives the room a deep warm glow that the amber lamp alone could never produce. He watches the flames shift and move, unhurried, uneven, beautiful in their randomness, and listens to the rain, which has become very soft now, barely more than a whisper against the glass. Outside, the village is completely still. Every window is dark. Every door is shut. Every person is asleep under their warm covers, in their warm rooms, entirely unaware that down in the small bakery on the main street, Arthur is sitting on his wooden stool, watching the fire and listening to the rain, and thinking about nothing in particular, and that within a few hours, when they come downstairs and open their front doors, there will be bread, fresh, warm, extraordinary bread, made in the ordinary dark hours while they slept. This is something that Arthur finds quietly, deeply satisfying. That the bread exists because of this darkness, because of this stillness, because of these hours that the rest of the village does not know. It is a gift made in secret, given without announcement, received without the receiver truly knowing the full story of its making. The clock on the wall reads 4:30. Arthur rises from his stool and checks the loaves. They have risen beautifully again, swelling gently above the edges of the tins, their surfaces smooth and slightly taut. He presses one gently with a finger, and the dough springs back slow and steady. He nods. He opens the oven door. The warm air rushes out against his face, and he slides the 4 loaf tins onto the stone floor of the oven, one after another, placing them carefully so they are not touching. He closes the iron door with a soft, low clang, and the oven absorbs them. Now he goes back to the kitchen and fills the kettle again, and while it heats, he prepares his second tea of the morning. While the bread bakes, the smell begins, slowly at first, then more powerfully, then completely. It is one of the finest smells in the world, Arthur has always believed. The smell of bread baking in a stone oven in the early hours of the morning, when everything outside is dark and quiet, and the warmth of the bakery is the only warmth for many streets in every direction. It is a smell that gets into everything, into the walls and the cloth and the wood of the table and Arthur's own hair and hands, and it never loses its ability to make him feel somewhere in his chest a deep and wordless gratitude. He carries his second cup of tea into the bakery and sits back down on his wooden stool. He reaches for the small book on the shelf beside the stool, a collection of quiet essays that he has been reading very slowly for the past several minutes, reading only a page or two each morning while he waits for the bread. He opens it to his page and reads slowly, moving his lips slightly the way he does when he is reading something he wants to understand properly. The words move through him slowly, like the warmth through the oven, and he turns the pages without hurry, and the rain taps gently on the window, and the smell of bread fills everything. At 5:45, Arthur closes the book and sets it back on its shelf. He puts on the large, heavy oven gloves, dark brown with small patches where the padding has worn thin, and opens the oven door. The heat pours out in a great warm wave. He peers in at the loaves. They are perfectly done. The crust is a deep golden brown, almost mahogany in places where the heat was greatest, with a long clean split along the top where the dough expanded in the early heat of the oven. He takes the tins out one by one and sets them on the wire cooling racks on the counter. Then he runs the tip of one finger along the top crust of the nearest loaf, just lightly, just barely touching it, and hears the hollow knock that tells him the bread is baked through. He tips each loaf from its tin carefully and stands them upright on the cooling racks. They steam gently in the cool morning air. The crust crackles softly as it contracts. A tiny sound, barely audible, like the sound of something settling comfortably into itself after a long effort. Arthur leans against the counter with his arms crossed and looks at the 4 loaves and feels the same feeling he always feels at this moment. A feeling that is not quite pride and not quite satisfaction, but something quieter and more complete than either. A feeling of things being as they should be, of a small but necessary part of the world being in its right and proper order. He goes back to the kitchen and begins to prepare the sweet rolls. He takes the pastry dough from the cold room and rolls it out on the floured table, gently, steadily, the rolling pin moving in long, even strokes away from him and back, away and back, until the dough is an even rectangle about the thickness of 2 fingers. He spreads a thin layer of soft butter across the surface, then a careful layer of cinnamon sugar, dark brown and aromatic, and rolls the whole thing into a long cylinder, the way he has done hundreds of times, pressing lightly with both hands to keep the roll firm and even. He cuts it into 12 equal pieces with his bench scraper and places them cut side up in the round baking tin, close together but not touching. He covers them with the cloth and sets them near the oven. Outside, the sky has begun its slow and barely perceptible change. It is still dark, but it is a slightly different dark from what it was an hour ago. A dark that has something waiting inside it, something lightening far away on the horizon beyond the village. Arthur opens the back door of the kitchen and steps outside for a moment onto the stone step, breathing in the cool, damp air. The rain has stopped. Everything is very quiet and very still. The air smells of wet earth and rain, and the faint lingering smoke from chimneys throughout the village. Somewhere in the garden, a blackbird makes one single short sound and then is quiet again. Arthur stands on the step for a little while, just breathing, just listening to the silence of the village around him. He can see the rooftops of the houses across the lane, dark shapes against the slightly paler sky. A light comes on in an upstairs window 3 houses down. Old Margaret, who always wakes early to read before breakfast. He watches the warm orange square of her window for a moment, feeling a kind of quiet companionship with it, that they should both be awake at this hour, she in her bedroom with her book, and he here on his step in his flowery apron. 2 people among all the sleeping village, quietly awake, quietly going about their morning. He goes back inside. The sweet rolls go into the oven at 6 o'clock. The loaves on the cooling rack have lost most of their steam now and are cool enough to handle, though still faintly warm when he lifts them. He arranges them on the wide wooden shelf behind the front counter of the bakery, 2 on the left, 2 on the right, spaced evenly, looking as they always look at this hour, warm and golden and quietly magnificent. He places the small hand-lettered card in front of them that says simply, in Arthur's unhurried handwriting, sourdough. Today's bake. He sweeps the flour from the floor of the bakery with the wide flat broom, slow steady strokes from the back of the room to the front, gathering the pale flour dust into a small pile near the door. He wipes down the wooden table with a damp cloth, clearing the last traces of dough and flour from its surface, until it is clean and smooth and pale again and ready for tomorrow. He wipes down the counter. He washes the mixing bowl and the spoons and the tins in the deep stone sink, the water running warm over his hands, the soap cutting through the flour and butter on the surfaces of the utensils. He sets everything upside down on the draining board, orderly and clean. The sweet rolls come out of the oven at 6:25, golden on top, their edges just touching each other where they have expanded in the heat, the cinnamon sugar between the layers dark and caramelized and smelling of warmth and sweetness and early morning. He sets them on their own cooling rack and leans down to breathe in the smell of them, and he smiles. A small, quiet smile, the kind that does not need any witness. Outside, the sky is now unmistakably lighter. The darkness has softened to a deep blue grey, and the shapes of the houses across the lane are more clearly visible, their rooftops and chimney pots distinct against the paling sky. A few more birds have begun to call, tentative, exploratory sounds, as though testing whether it is truly morning yet. The air through the back door smells different now, less like night and more like the first thin edge of day. Arthur puts the kettle on one last time. He makes his third tea of the morning. This one he will drink slowly, sitting in the wooden chair by the front window of the bakery, looking out at the empty street while the last few minutes of quiet remain. He carries the mug to the chair and sits down. The chair is old and worn and shaped to him after many years of sitting in it at just this hour in just this way. He wraps both hands around the warm mug and looks out at the street. The cobblestones glisten from the earlier rain. The shop fronts across the street are dark and still. The old stone wall at the end of the lane is dark with moisture, its surface soft and grey. A pigeon walks slowly along the top of the wall, pausing every few steps, then walking again. Arthur watches it for a while. The warmth from the bakery behind him is steady and gentle, carrying the smell of bread and cinnamon into every corner of the room and out through the small gap at the top of the window into the cool morning air of the street. He is tired in the way he is always tired at this hour, a clean, honest tiredness, the tiredness of a man who has worked steadily and well through the quiet hours and is now resting. It is a good tiredness, not the kind that weighs on you, but the kind that settles around you warmly, like a blanket, like a long exhale. His eyes are heavy, the mug is warm in his hands, the bread is cooling on its rack behind him. The rolls are fragrant and golden in their tin. Everything is done, and everything is right, and the village is beginning, very slowly, to wake. Arthur's head nods once, his eyelids drop. He breathes in the warm air of his bakery, the flour, the bread, the cinnamon, the old wood, the faint lingering smoke. And he breathes out slowly. The pigeon on the wall lifts its wings and is gone. The sky outside is turning the palest possible shade of blue-grey. The street is still empty. The mug is still warm in his hands. And Arthur, who has been awake since 3 o'clock in the morning, who has lit the fire and made the dough, and kneaded the bread, and shaped the loaves, and baked them golden in the old stone oven, and swept the floor, and washed the bowls, and arranged everything in its proper place. Arthur, who has done all of this in the quiet and the dark, while the whole village slept, quietly, peacefully, lets his eyes close. He sleeps. And outside, the first light of morning comes softly over the rooftops of the village, and the rain-washed cobblestones begin to glow faintly gold, and the smell of fresh bread drifts out gently from the small bakery on the main street, and everything is still, and everything is warm, and everything is exactly as it should be. And you, my friend, wherever you are tonight, you can let go now too. The day is done. You have done enough. You are safe, and it is time to sleep.